Welcome to the Stupid Fans Club podcast. I am your host, Shaan Donn, and this is the inaugural episode of my official podcast, sports podcast. This has been a long time in the making, man. I've always wanted to do a podcast, and I've probably gone through so many different topics for podcasts or genres of podcasts. And I landed on sports. It's one of the many things I love. Who knows? There may be more iterations coming in the future, but right now, we're all about the Stupid Fans Club podcast. And I'm super excited. Jumping into the name, I wanted a name or a title for the podcast to like set the tone of what it's about. Um, and Stupid Fans Club. I'm sure you're asking why Stupid Fans? Because that's what we all are. Okay. We have to accept it. I am not a sports analyst. I am not a former professional athlete. I maxed out in high school with sports. But I wanted to make a podcast for fans and from fans. So, you know, um, I want to break down things on this podcast from the passionate, the eye test, the emotions, the everything that embodies a fan. That's what I want this to represent. I don't want to get too deep in the analytics and the plus minus. It's we're talking about this stuff from the perspective of fans, hence the title. Um, so without further ado, I mean, we're gonna jump into many different sports. Mainly, we'll focus in the basketball, football, and some boxing stuff. Um, we'll probably have some topics on baseball here and there, especially when the playoffs come up. Those are right around the corner. Go Braves! Um, but yeah, I am excited about this. I am super excited for anyone joining me on this journey. And one more important thing to note: we will have guests here and there on the podcast. So sometimes it'll be just me, and other times we'll have some guests joining other overly qualified stupid fans, and we'll do it that way. So for the first one, it's just me and you, baby, just me and you. But no, we're gonna jump into it. I have a few topics to go over, and I think um the best place to start really is with this college football season. This is now underway. Go Dogs. As you can probably see above. I'm Atlanta everything. Let's go ahead and set the ground rules. I won't be biased, but Braves, Falcons, Dogs, even Georgia Tech. I mean, like we root from afar, but you know, all Atlanta everything, all Georgia everything, man. So, speaking of Georgia Tech, um, Florida State versus Georgia Tech. That was the kickoff game in Ireland, and that was an incredible way to start off the season, in my opinion. I think football has been football as a whole, not even specifically the NFL, but football as a whole, including college, has been slow to the expansion of American football. Um, and so you now see NFL playing more expansion games overseas, and college as well. So I thought that was good for the overall landscape of football. But that FSU Georgia Tech game, I mean, it came down to the wire, and I thought it was amazing all the way through. Um, the surprises for some people may have been Georgia Tech and how well they played. But again, I'm a Dogs fan. And so Georgia Tech had been on my radar since we played them last year at the end of the season. We always played Tech at the end of the season. And that wasn't the regular Georgia Tech football game. We won the game and we ended up winning it comfortably. But it was a competitive game, and you could just feel the energy is different there at Georgia Tech. Like, it's not the same old Yellow Jackets. It's not the same old option you all the way down the field. They had a good offense. They had a strong defense. And I remember coming into this Florida State game, and I said, man, if they are remotely close to where they were last year, and of course you would expect them to improve now that they have that coach and have their system and the players buying in. I said, man, if they're anywhere close to where they were last year, this is going to be a better game than most people think. On top of that, they're playing Florida State, who came into the season ranked number 10, and I personally thought they were overranked. Um, we know that DJU, and we'll jump into him a little later too, but we know that DJU typically leaves a little more to be desired. They lost a lot of players to the draft, and I just wasn't seeing it. So I felt that Florida State was overranked. They may have been a top 25 team at best, but number 10, I just didn't see it. And Georgia Tech, I felt, was flying under the radar. I felt like they could potentially be a top 25 team. But again, it's the beginning of the season. Who knows? Like you think you know how good or bad someone is, and you watch the game and you're like, oh, I was completely wrong. So Florida State, Georgia Tech. It starts off. Florida State marches down the field, and I'm like, okay, Florida State looks good on offense. Then I think the biggest pivotal moment in that game, or what kind of just set the tone, was Georgia Tech's response. I mean, you got to put it into perspective. This is a very high energy, adrenaline running high. It's the kickoff game. It's more Florida State fans in there than Georgia Tech fans. And they just marched down the field for the first touchdown of the season. And so they got the new quarterback. They're coming off the season of feeling like they were slept on or left out of the college football playoff. And for Georgia Tech to respond and march right back down the field, mind you, Florida State, they did a surprise 2-point conversion. I mean, all of the momentum coming into the season, coming into that game, was on Florida State's side. And so to me, that was the tone setter of, we're here. We're this isn't gonna go like, again, how a typical your old Georgia Tech game would go. We blow you out. It's not close. No, they immediately responded and marched down the field, and I felt like that was a huge momentum boost and tone setter for that game. Their offensive line, I felt like, dominated. They ran the ball when they wanted to, and it was a tie game at halftime, but if it wasn't for Ryan Fitzgerald 59-yard field goal, I think Georgia Tech goes into that half with all the momentum. I think that was a huge field goal by Ryan Fitzgerald, and helped balance that momentum out, even probably leaning it more to Florida State going into the half. I think the third quarter was a battle of the defenses. I felt like Georgia Tech's defense was making stops. Florida State's defense was making stops. And there were some inaccurate throws by DJU where they could have scored. And then I think Georgia Tech once again responded, and they ended up scoring to start the fourth quarter. And that's where things got interesting. So Georgia Tech goes up late in that fourth quarter, and here comes DJU. He has rightfully so gotten a lot of criticism, but at the end of the day, and I don't even know if we can say rightfully so, DJU, as I said, can leave more to be desired. But he's a winning football quarterback at the end of the day. And so I think the expectations were, again, he was the successor to Trevor Lawrence, and he played well in a game when I think Trevor was out, and um, expectations were super high. So he's had that stigma follow him, and then he's kind of just bounced around from schools, and just um, hasn't lived up to the hype or the expectation around him. So I think some of the criticism is unfair, but boy, that fourth quarter, he showed the glances that we sometimes see from DJU. he made he started with a crazy third down conversion. It was, I want to say, 3rd and 7 or so, um, and made a huge third down conversion to keep their drive going. Needed the score, couldn't get off the field, and if that wasn't enough, Georgia Tech makes a third down stop. It's 4th and 7. Actually, it's 4th and 7. And again, it's all or nothing. DJU makes a 20-yard gain on that play with his arm. Beautiful pass, and keeps the drive going, keeps them alive. And again, it just shows the glances and the glimpses we see of greatness from DJU. From he shows you glances of what the expectations were, and again, Georgia Tech. I'm sorry. He leads them down for a touchdown. I think that was huge, and I was like, man, if Florida State wins this game, he's probably going to have his moment of like all the doubters, all of this, because there was big time. He had some earlier missed throws in that third quarter, but listen, he showed up when it mattered, tied the game up, and put the pressure right back on Georgia Tech. And here is where I found it to be a bit of poetic justice, if you will. You remember at the beginning of the game, Florida State went down the field, scored, momentum on their side. At the end of the game, Florida State comes out and has this drive with DJU, tying the game up. And again, when the stakes are at its highest, crowd is roaring, everybody's hyped, first game of the season, Georgia Tech responds. The same way they responded on that first drive, this is the same way they responded on their last drive. And again, it was another third down conversion. Jamal Haynes made a big play to put them in field goal range. And then they had that mishandled snap, but still in field goal range, and ended up winning it on a game-winning field goal. And again, that's why that drive and that response from Georgia Tech in the beginning of the game was so important, because again, it just set the tone of like, this is not the same old Georgia Tech. And to me, their response, you know what? No. Their NFL comp, to me, Georgia Tech, is the Detroit Lions. I think that is their exact comp. And again, I'm not the Detroit Lions went to the NFC Championship last year. I'm not saying that Georgia Tech is going to the national championship game or anything like that. But again, it is that culture that this coach has brought them. The players have clearly bought in, and they're not. I think Aaron Rodgers said it a few years ago. It's not the same old Lions. This is not the same old Georgia Tech team. They, and again, speaking of playoffs, if they find a way to sneak in there, because the ACC is still up for grabs. I know Miami had a big game, and they'll obviously be the favorites to win the ACC. But I think Georgia Tech is one of those teams that you don't want to see. I mean, that could very easily be the ACC championship, and that's not a walk in the park. Like, Georgia Tech is one of those teams you do not want to see when it matters. They're well coached. They play hard. everybody is bought in down there. And listen, I think the sky is the ceiling for them. But I thought it was a great outing from Georgia Tech, and like I said, I was impressed but not shocked because I saw glimpses of this from the Georgia Tech game last year. And again, I knew if they could keep that going, um, they were going to be a dangerous team, and they showed it out in front of the world against Florida State. So Georgia Tech, let's see what's up next for them on their end. So obviously they played my alma mater, go Panthers, Georgia State last year, and they won that game pretty handedly. And look, I think Georgia Tech has a fair schedule. They play at Syracuse um, this upcoming weekend. Their next big game is at Louisville, which should be a competitive game. Um, they have Notre Dame, and I think so. Their season starts off a little fluffy. They have some games that they could win, should win. But I think it's towards the end of the season where things will start being a little more a little more challenging for them. Again, they play Notre Dame, then they go at Virginia Tech, which is a winnable game, but then they have Miami, NC State, and then at Georgia to end the season. Um, Again, still a dangerous team. I don't. It's yet to be seen how good they'll be, but again, it's just that they just seem like a team that you don't want to see, especially when it matters. That's a team that you're going to have to go and beat. It's not going to be you just show up and beat Georgia Tech anymore. So shout out to Georgia Tech. FSU, Florida State. So I felt like after that game, things kind of got blown a bit out of proportion. I think it was such a big win for Georgia Tech and also Florida State, again, coming off of the season they had last year and then coming into this season being a top 10 team. Um, I felt like people overreacted a bit. People started slandering DJU. He's not the guy. Here's the evidence again. And again, he did have some missed throws, some inaccurate throws in that game. But when it mattered, he delivered. He went down the field and tied that game up. Now, some people will obviously argue we wouldn't have been in that position had you made the other plays, but throw that out of the window. When it mattered, when they needed to at least tie the game, it can always be a woulda, shoulda, coulda thing. But when he still had an opportunity, he drove down the field and got them in the end zone. And with some big plays, you couldn't even say, oh, the run game took him there. It was DJU who led that drive. And so, and at the end of the day, it was a 3-point game. Like they lost off of a game winning field goal, right? So, and also the other point is, again, Georgia Tech was slept on. I felt like they were actually playing a top 25 team. That's the danger of the beginning of the season. Like I said in the beginning, you don't really know how good or bad a team is. So on paper, it looks like, oh, this is such a crazy upset. But it didn't take but week 2 to see that this maybe actually should have been flipped, right? Maybe Georgia Tech should have been the ranked team, and Florida State should have been unranked. And so I planned on coming in here and defending DJU as I've sort of just did, and just throwing him some bail, and just putting things into perspective for people. But then Monday night, Florida State played Boston College. And I almost recorded this before that game because surely, I mean, again, Florida State was overranked in my opinion, and they lost to Georgia Tech. But surely Boston College at home, you were overseas. That was a lot going on. First game of the season. Um, Surely they're going to respond against Boston College. There won't be much to talk about there. Let me record on Monday. But due to scheduling conflicts, I pushed it to Tuesday, today. And I'm eating dinner, watching Florida State go down big. I think when I turned it on, it was 21-6 to Boston College. And now Boston College, they have Bill O'Brien there now, former NFL head coach for the Texans and longtime assistant coach. They are on the rise, but that loss there was just inexcusable, and it gave me cause to pause on the defense of DJU. I saw some passes there that just were like I think it's probably out of the window for him playing on the next level. Like, I mean, some of the passes is inaccuracies and decisions that he's making at this tenure in his career, it's just unacceptable. At home against Boston College, you're maybe the ceiling isn't as high as people expected coming into the season, but you're still Florida State. You're still a respectable team. You guys still have good players, and they just laid an egg. They got beat by Boston College. They could not stop the run, and I mean, it wasn't even anything advanced. Boston College was running on Madden. They were running halfback dives. If you don't know what a halfback dive is, that is I get the ball and I run straight through the middle, through all the traffic, and they're gaining 10, 12, 15 yards on those. And it just, I think, I mean, when you say the season is over, they can still make a bowl game. But in terms of college football playoff hopes, and you're probably playing for bowls now, like in week 2. Like, it turned around that quickly. And yeah, that was just a shocker to me. I did not expect to have to come in here and kind of reverse my defense of Florida State and DJU. Who knows where they'll end up? Actually, let's look and see who Florida State has. Florida State is 0-2, and they have Memphis coming up. I don't know if this is a bye week or I guess maybe it's considered a bye week. They played on Monday, so they don't play again until the 14th of this month. But they have Memphis Cal, and then they go at SMU. I mean, look, they have some tough games. Yeah, they play at Miami, at Notre Dame at the end of the season. It's, I mean, kind of even looking ahead. I mean, I think we still have to wait and see. Like, there's no game now that you can just write off and say, "Oh, FSU will get that one. FSU has that one. They'll take care of business." We don't know. Like, we have to see now. Like, okay, you lost to Georgia Tech, so you're not as good as we thought. So you're here. Well, you lost to Boston College, so you're really here. And so we have to kind of see where they bottom out. Like, are you a 4-win team? Are you a 6-win team? Like we have to see now. But I think they still have a good coach, Mike Norvell, and they have good players. This is why it's shocking. Again, I expected a competitive game against Georgia Tech. I don't know that I expected Georgia Tech to beat them, but I surely didn't expect Boston College to go into Florida State and beat them like that. And that is the other thing. I tried to give them the defense of Georgia Tech winning by field goal last seconds. Um, Boston College blew them out. This wasn't close. The closest it was 21-13, and Boston College got the ball right back and scored right after that. Like it just it wasn't competitive. Boston College looked like the better team. So that is the recap for Florida State and what to expect for them. I thought that was again, Florida State Georgia Tech game was a great way to start off the season, and we'll see where those teams land. The other big game that I want to go over or discuss is the Colorado versus North Dakota State game. That was a big game. And I think I just read somewhere it broke viewership for an opening night Thursday game for ESPN. We obviously know Colorado will have eyes on them. North Dakota State. This was another game that I had my eyes on a little closer than others. In the same way that I knew kind of like Georgia Tech may shock some people with how good they are, it was the same thing for North Dakota State. In the offseason, I'm super excited for the season to start. And, it was kind of this uncertainty energy about Colorado. It's like we think they're going to be good this year. We think they'll improve. They have, a bunch of transfer guys, and they got better. They beefed up on the line, and what are we going to see from Colorado? So I heard a college football insider break down this Colorado North Dakota State game. And the way that he talked about that game kind of shocked me. And I was completely unaware. He said that the athletic director who scheduled this game, however long ago they scheduled it, should be fired. And his reasoning was that, North Dakota State is an FCS football team. He says you don't schedule an FCS game that you could lose. And again, Colorado is, it's hard to even know if they're a good football team yet. Like this is before the season. We don't know what they are. So there's certain teams like, Alabama, Georgia, a top tier Power 5 team can maybe schedule North Dakota State because we just know they're so much superior. Colorado is unranked, and we don't know what to expect from them. We know they have good players. They have an exciting coach, but we don't know how good they are. So scheduling against a team who has a cemented culture and is one of the powerhouses in the FCS. I think they said they won 7 FCS championships or something. Like, they are a dominant force. And he was basically saying like they could very well lose this game. And the thing is, Colorado's schedule, we'll get to that soon, I'm sure, but they don't have the easiest schedule. Like, they play Nebraska this week, and Nebraska is supposed to be good this year. And we saw Dylan Raiola and those guys and how they performed this past week. And they're going into Nebraska. Man, it's easy. Like the Florida State thing, it's like, man, this could easily start out 0-2, and I think this is a year of expectation for Colorado. So starting out 0-2 is it's a bad look, especially if it is against the FCS team. Say all that to say, this game was circled for me, and I had a closer eye on it than I think the masses did. And so pretty much, I think North Dakota State almost immediately showed that they're here. The same way Georgia Tech did. Like, they went down the field. I think that first drive they had a big chunk run, and then Colorado was able to stop them. boom, Colorado responds back, goes down the field, a touchdown. But then North Dakota State responded after that, right? Like Colorado was able to stop them on that first drive, and then they scored pretty easily on their first drive. And so you're thinking like, okay, is Colorado improved? Are they gonna take care of business like a typical FBS school should against an FCS, especially in first game of the season, right? So they go march. North Dakota State marches down the field, and they get in the end zone. And I think from there, towards the end of the first quarter, I think I started to feel like North Dakota State's offense could hang with Colorado's offense, right? Like offense to offense, and not in the same way, because I think they had that 2-play drive. I think Shador, when he had that big pass to Jimmy Horn for like 78 yards. I think the way that we saw North Dakota State, they had huge time of possession. They were just converting third downs, moving the ball down the field at their pace. And so I think in that regard, they were able to hang with Colorado. They could score with Colorado's offense, is what I'm saying. The gap for me was Colorado's skill players, particularly their receivers, versus North Dakota State's secondary and defense. I think that was the bigger gap. So again, offense to offense, it was I can score, you can score. But I think just the gap in, Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn, Shador Sanders, and what North Dakota State could provide on defense, it just wasn't enough. So that was kind of what I started to see in that first quarter. And then we get to kind of the penalties from Colorado, kind of undisciplined things that we saw last year. They were not able to get off the field on third downs. And I think they had one in particular where it was a third down stop. And I think I forgot what it was, an offside, lined up offside, something like that. Third down stop. Got off the field, but extended the drive. And then North Dakota State scores in 2 plays after that. So again, it's kind of that expectation of Colorado. We want to see some improvements, and you're kind of seeing some things leak over that we saw last year. I think where things really turned, or things got really tight for Colorado, they were seeing how much time that North Dakota State was taking in their possessions. Shador was just sitting over there getting cold. Like, they were eating up the clock in scoring on their drives. I think I don't know that in the first half that they stopped them at all from putting up points. I think maybe later in the first half, maybe, but their first few drives, Colorado didn't stop them from scoring points at all. And so it gets to that 4th and 1 with Colorado has the ball, and they're in their own territory. And obviously Dion and the coaching staff felt like they needed to go for that because they felt the momentum shifting, and they saw that these guys can score and they can score on us. And so they go for it on 4th and 1 and don't get it. And now you're taking a team who has scored on every drive, whether field goal or touchdown. They've scored on every drive they have had, and you give them less than half the field. I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to get crazy, because if they were to score a touchdown there, they were going to take a 2-possession lead there. And Colorado ends up getting off the field. And then what happened? The penalties again. Shiloh Sanders, late hit. After they get off the field, after making a huge stop against this team who scored on you on every drive, making a huge stop, gets the penalty, extends the drive, and now it is 1st and goal. Now it's not a like if they're going to score. It's like we have to like try to stop them from getting in this end zone. We have to find a way because again, they haven't punted yet. And so I am just on the edge of my seat, but luckily for Colorado, and I won't even say just luck. Like they have some good stops there in that goal line stand, but there are also some penalties from North Dakota State that backed them up, and they end up settling for a field goal. But that was one that could have changed the trajectory of that game. That would have been huge if North Dakota State would have scored a touchdown there. I thought that was super scary for Colorado there, but they stepped up when they needed to. Had some help from North Dakota State, and then Shador Sanders. After that drive, I think it was about 56 seconds left on the clock before the half, and Colorado needs something. They need something going for them. And 56 seconds, Shador goes 89 yards down the field and gets them 3 points to end the half. And I mean, just shows why he's going to be one of the top quarterbacks taken, if not the top quarterback taken next year, and why he's a Heisman candidate. I mean, that was just artwork. I think at halftime he said he loves those moments. Those are his favorite moments. But another thing that stuck out to me was he in that interview he said that we need to score every time, and he could have been saying that as a mentality thing, like every time I touch the ball, we got to score. Or I didn't know if he meant that from I can't trust the defense. Like we have to score every single time or we're going to lose. But that was again kind of showed you, and we know Colorado ends up winning this game, but that shows you there's some leaks, there's some holes that, and again, you're not going to be perfect in the first game of the season. But I think this is a year. Last year was a year of excitement for Colorado, and this is a year of expectation. And so I think in less than 4 days on this weekend coming up, we're going to find out a lot about Colorado and how good or how bad they are. But the second half of that game, I think, again, that gap started to show. The North Dakota State wasn't really able to do much. They scored late at the end of that, at the end of the game to cut the lead down. But I felt like Colorado was pretty dominant throughout the rest of the game and showed their superiority over that FCS team. But one thing we have to talk about is Travis Hunter. That kid, man, he's unbelievable, playing both sides of the ball. I think I heard that he only was out for 3 or 4 snaps in the entire game on both sides. Like he is he's just unbelievable. Some of those catches he was making before the crazy touchdown catch, the one that he caught but was his feet were just out of bounds. I mean, again, another guy clearly going to be a top pick in next year's draft, and he's unbelievable. He elevates Colorado so much. I mean, think about if it wasn't for Deion's recruiting, man. Like, think about where this Colorado team would be without him. He is that dominant. I mean, scored the first touchdown. Scored the last one, I believe, to kind of put things away. 3 touchdowns? I think he had 132 yards. Jimmy Horn had 7 catches, 198 yards with 1 touchdown. So Travis probably was the player of the game, but didn't have the most yards, but definitely had the most touchdowns. I mean, it was the Shador Travis Hunter show, um, and we'll see. I think long term, it's you're gonna they're gonna have to figure out a way to spread the wealth, especially with Travis playing both sides of the ball. Just durability and with their schedule they have, like other players are gonna have to show up. You can't. We saw last year where everything was just on Shador. Travis Hunter got hurt, and it just kind of all fell apart. But um, overall, a good win for Colorado. Again, I think they were um, playing a really tough FCS team, and they needed everything they got out of Travis Hunter and Shador to be able to pull that out. But North Dakota State, I think they'll have a fine season, and they could be one of those teams in the college football playoff from the group of five. So we'll see. We'll see. And then, as I said, it's all Georgia everything over here, baby. UGA and Clemson. The number one team in the country came out and showed why they're the number one team in the country. This game I don't have much of a breakdown for. At the end of the day, it was 34-3. Shout out to my brother Javon, another Stupid Fans Club expert, who will be joining us for some college football stuff and other sports talk. But he bought us tickets to the game. Me and my friend Kane, who is a Clemson fan. So we were in attendance. My first college football game in forever. It was in Atlanta, so not in Athens. But the first thing that stood out to me in attending that game was the atmosphere. The atmosphere was like no other. It's not like an NFL game at all. Like it is that college atmosphere, and I think maybe it was added to from this being the first game of the season. But man, oh man, I remember before I'm walking in, getting ready to scan my tickets, and it's and there were a lot of Clemson fans in there, and makes sense. Like South Carolina is an hour and some change from us, so Clemson fans behind me, and they are super excited. And I hear one of them say, "Man, 15 minutes until the end of the Georgia Bulldogs season. I can't wait." And I'm just listening to the things because I got there before any of my friends did, and I'm listening to just and watching just the excitement and the hype around this. And I'm like, man, and you get to your seats, you could just feel the energy. You see the Clemson fans, you see the Georgia fans, and it was like, man. And again, it's a little scary for the first game of the season. I'll say it again. You don't really know. Like, we think we're the number one team in the country. We think Clemson is number 14 team in the country. But how many times have we seen, like, I take the Georgia schedule for last year. At the beginning of the year, everyone was Georgia's schedule is a joke. Georgia's schedule. And then it ended up being very challenging, especially some teams that, like, we had to come back against South Carolina. It ended up being another undefeated regular season. I'll say that again, another undefeated regular season. But those were some challenging games. That Auburn game was tough. That Georgia Tech game was tough. Missouri, like this, the teams that you look at the beginning of the year and you say like, oh, they're this, and by the time you get to them, they're this. That can change. So it was just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of angst. But obviously, Georgia went out there and took care of business. Got off to a slow start. It was close for pretty much the whole first half. And it you could see Georgia. It's a new team, so you could see Georgia trying to get their rhythm, build their chemistry, get things together. I thought Clemson's defense played well in that first half too. They looked pretty good. Number 0 for Clemson, Antonio, I want to say. Can't remember his last name, but he was a standout player for them. I think he's going to be a good receiver. Um, and I think Clemson will be okay. I think they weren't the number 14 team in the country. I think I saw the rankings this week. They dropped to 25. But I think they'll be a decent team. They can respond and bounce back from this very, very early in the season. Obviously, very first game. But Cade Klubnik, I kind of see the narrative of what you saw with DJU. Like, expectation is here, and then we end up getting this. And so yeah, I think they'll be okay, but Georgia dominated that second half. They looked unbelievable on both sides of the ball. I do think, and I'm always going to critique, it was a 34-3 win, but we definitely have room to grow. Obviously, still got to build that chemistry on the offense. Excuse me. And I felt like their run defense was a little like, and I don't want to compare everything to the 2021 Georgia defense. That's like once every decade you get a defense like that or so, but if that. But there was some, like, I felt like Clemson had some success running the ball, gaining yards. I remember at one point I looked over to Javon and I said, man, they start off every drive with like a big run. They were getting like big chunk runs on their drives. But I think we're really good, and we obviously, Georgia, our schedule is daunting. I think we have the number 3 hardest schedule in the country. I think Florida has the toughest, in the Mississippi State. It's going to be an interesting season, but I think we are clearly very good, and we're going to be a tough beat. I do think this will probably be, and it pains me to say this, obviously, I don't want to experience losses at all, but I think this will probably be the year where we don't go undefeated in the regular season, but what a year to do that. That is one of the most exciting things about college football this year, is the fact that you don't have to beat a team and make it look pretty and run the score up, and like, you don't have to make it a pageant show. You can lose 1 or 2 games and it not be the end of the world, right? Depending on who you lose it to. You can't do what Florida State did, right? And that's a different situation. But very excited about what I saw. Nate Frazier, the running back, obviously Travis Etienne was benched for his offseason troubles, and so he didn't get to play. But Nate Frazier, the freshman, unbelievable. He has a shiftiness to him, and I am very excited about it. Javon and I had a big laugh as we were leaving the game. We were watching the post game interview with Kirby, and Kirby didn't want to give him no credit. Like, Nate Frazier was a clear standout in that game, and he was like, he's still got a lot to learn. He's so much more improvement. Yeah, we're not gonna crown anybody yet. And I'm like, sheesh. But I guess that's how you got to do freshmen. Keep them from getting big heads. But he looked fantastic. It was to the point that because obviously Etienne was our probably our biggest pickup in the portal this year, and Javon and I both looked at each other like, Etienne better come back with a vengeance. Because this guy right here is not messing around. He looked fantastic. He was probably the star of the show for UGA for me. Um, and then Malachi Starks, my favorite UGA player. His jersey will be in my closet very, very soon. When I get it, I'll wear it on here. Malachi Starks. I mean, I can't say enough about him. Another guy who's clearly gonna be a top draft pick next year. Gonna hate to lose him here, but he is just fantastic. And he showed it again. That interception was unbelievable. And then ESPN showed the side by side with him doing the same thing in the Oregon game about 2 years ago. He is he's just a beast, man, and I'm very excited about because I think he'll be the leader of that defense this year. Um, and so I'm very excited to see him and all the good things he'll do for us. Um, and then for Clemson, let's see what they have coming up. Again, I think they're still in good shape. I don't think it's the end of the world for them. Um, but let's see what Clemson has coming up in the ACC. They have App State next, and because of Florida State, I will pause before I say they'll take care of business. But I think they'll handle App State there. They'll have a tough game against NC State at home. They have at Florida State, at Wake Forest. I mean, there's not a lot of daunting teams on here. Like it'll be some competitive games, and again, we'll see how good or bad Clemson actually is. But there's not a lot of shaking in my boots games on their schedule, so they could easily rebound and be just fine this season. And hopefully they get better from there. I did feel like coming into the season, Dabo was on the hot seat, if we can say that. I felt like it's been a few down years after their run, and I think I was, in down years as in like they just were not very competitive. They weren't in the discussion for the ACC, and I think if you're not going to be a top team, I think at the very least they want you to be competitive in the ACC. And so I felt like they had some momentum towards the end of last season. And so I was very interested to see how they would be in this first game. And, we took care of business, but, again, Clemson can easily rebound, especially with the schedule, and they can be right there in it at the end of the season. So, again, TBD with Clemson. And with Georgia, again, I referenced it earlier. We have a daunting schedule. We get Tennessee Tech this week. We should obviously take care of business there. And then we get at Kentucky. Could be another tough SEC matchup. But then we get to business. And this one's going to be personal. It's at Alabama, who is now number 4 in the country. For some reason, Alabama, and again, I know they lost players and they lost Saban, but the way and the tone that people were talking about them this offseason was as if they just fell off a cliff and they were no longer relevant. They came into the season number 5 in the country, and they are number 4 now. That is going to be, and a lot of people were skipping straight to the Georgia Texas game, and it's like, no, we still have to face Alabama, and it's going to be at Alabama. It's personal with that, and I don't think we've beaten Alabama in a regular season game in Lord knows how many years. And that seems to be our kryptonite. I know Georgia, Kirby, the fans, everybody were anxious to show that we can beat them, and there's a new sheriff in town here. We want to show that we're the big dogs. So I think, especially how that SEC championship ended, and essentially ended our season from our ability to compete for another championship, a three-peat. Sour taste in our mouths about that, and we are going to be anxious to go out there and improve, not only the doubters and the critics wrong, but to ourselves. Like, show ourselves that we can beat this team, and not just back in the national championship. We can consistently beat Bama. So that's going to be a heck of a game. Obviously, the Texas game. And one thing I called out here was this is a setup game here. So we have Bama, huge game, going to be a lot of energy, a lot of coverage on that. And then they sneak Auburn right in after that. I will say this on here. I said it before, but I'll say it here. Had Georgia not had Brock Bowers last year, we would have lost that game to Auburn, in Auburn. I mean, that was a scary game. And Brock Bowers, again, very much like Travis Hunter, is just a beyond imagination good. And he carried us to that win, and ultimately ended up getting hurt that game. I guess played through it or whatnot, but he won us that football game at the very end against Auburn. And so that is another team where it's not like, oh, you got Auburn, it'll be okay. That is a scary football game, especially after such a high energy game the week before against Alabama. Georgia has to be very careful, and they know we're in the SEC. Like, we know about these teams, but they have to come in super focused for that, because it's not going to be a walk in the park. So, but at the end of the day, if we show up the way we should show up, we should beat Auburn. Like, it's a scary matchup, but you just want to come in there focused. But yeah, we have Bama, Texas, and Ole Miss and Tennessee are big matchups, and then Tech at the end of the season. Daunting schedule, man. I think I counted it today. We play 7 of the top 25 teams in the country at this moment. So Georgia's going to have to go out there and prove that we're number one. And, coming, no, top 4 is important. You get that bye week. Um, and just getting in there, getting into the playoffs is most important. It's no longer, again, thankfully, no longer a beauty pageant show where you got to beat every team. If you lose one game, you're threatening everything. Like, it's, we don't need to go perfect. We obviously want to go out there and win every game, but we don't have to be perfect. But definitely some games to circle for us. And got some other college football stuff, but we're probably going to switch gears here. I know running on time here. Let's switch gears to the beginning of the NFL season. I definitely want to get this in. The season starts in 2 days. Season starts Thursday, and it's going to be very interesting. I think there are a lot of teams who we are wondering about, who we're uncertain about. And let's start with the Falcons, man. Like, obviously we had the big draft where we took Michael Penix, and people were outraged. Very few people were excited about it. I know I wasn't in the beginning, because I felt that we needed an edge rusher. We needed to get to the quarterback on defense. And I felt like we didn't address that. But then here come the Falcons late in the offseason, picking up Judon and then picking up Simmons back for our secondary. Like, there is, I think that elevates us again to the favorites in the NFC South. Again, you don't know until you see it. But that made me a lot more excited um about the Falcons and expectations. But as a lifelong Falcons fan, I know to temper my expectations. I know not to get too high, not to get too low. Obviously, 28-3 uh, was an inspiration to the world because it truly showed that anything is possible. You can even be down 28-3 with 3 minutes left in the third quarter and lose the game. So, yeah, I know to temper my expectations with this team, but definitely some reasons to be excited. And then top 5 teams in the NFL coming into the season. I guess the too early predictions. I obviously have Kansas City. I put them at number one. They're the champions. You have to beat them. And as long as Patrick Mahomes is on that roster, they're going to be a tough team to beat and a tough team to stop from winning a championship. I felt like last year was a down year for them, and they won the Super Bowl. So, and then they had a doggone good defense that really helped them. It wasn't the year of the offensive explosion, but they're going to be a good team this year. I got them at number one, and then I got the Ravens at number two. They were this close to making it to the Super Bowl. Questionable game plan from them. Didn't seem to want to throw the ball. I heard a great comparison. Someone said Lamar played like a quarterback trying to prove to everybody that he can throw the ball instead of just doing what he's best at. And he's definitely proved. Like, I don't even think he needs to still prove that. Like, he's proven that he can throw the football and win football games that way. But you gotta, and especially AFC Championship, you gotta unleash your beast, if you will. So, but I have them with the addition of Eric Henry. I mean, they already had an incredible rushing attack, but you had Derrick Henry there. I mean, my gosh, like, it's great that Derrick Henry gets to compete now and potentially win a Super Bowl, but they are going to be a force in that running game, man. And not even, and again, Lamar Stone, he could throw. They obviously have Zay there, so I mean, I think they're going to be a force again. And who knows? Could be a rematch in that AFC Championship. Um, and the Eagles, I have them as a top 5 team. I don't know what happened at the end of the season. That was a very peculiar. They just fell apart, and I know people were saying they were winning games and but getting away with things. But I feel like they have a really good core. They have a really good system, and they should be able to bounce back. Like, I feel like Jalen Hurts, um, you have a Devontae Smith, Brown, and then you add Saquon. I mean, I think they should be a force and have a bounce back year. And I think they again would come in being the favorites in the NFC East. So I have them as a top contender this year. And obviously the 49ers on there as well. Made it to the Super Bowl, fell short. But they got Ayuk back finally. I saw today, actually, they just were able to come to an agreement with Trent Williams. Brock Purdy got some more years of experience under his belt, making it all the way to the Super Bowl. Debo, McCaffrey, of course, he's coming back off that injury. I, they are going to be a force again in the NFC. And we'll see. And at the fifth spot, I have the Dolphins. It was tough because I thought about the Lions maybe, but I have the Dolphins there. Obviously, Tyreek Hill, and they'll be start the season at full health again. Um, we'll see what that defense can do. We'll see if Tua can stay healthy, and hopefully be able to spread the wealth. It's a narrative around them and Tua that if it's not for Tyreek, or if Tyreek isn't out there, then y'all ain't nothing. So we'll see. Again, I think they scored 70 on a team early last year, had a lot of hype around them, and then as the season came towards an end, you kind of started to see like, I don't know. So we'll see what comes from the Dolphins, but those are my top 5, man. Chiefs, Ravens, Eagles, 49ers, and the Dolphins. So super excited about the year. And then week 1, the games to circle for me would be obviously the game that we have here in a couple days, Ravens, Chiefs, AFC championship rematch. We'll see where those teams stand. I obviously have those two in my top 5. Friday night game should be interesting. We got the Packers and the Eagles. Packers gonna be interested to see, what they look like after their surprise run in the playoffs. They were one of those teams again. They snuck in there, and they made a little run. Obviously, put the Cowboys out. Dangerous team, and then Jordan Love obviously showed what he's about, what he can do. So gonna be very interested to see how they take the next step this year. And then again, the return of the Eagles. Let's see if they can bounce back. But I think that should be a really exciting game. And again, Friday night game. Maybe first time ever I saw that somewhere. So that should be interesting. Titans Bears. Caleb Williams, Williams, and Roma Dunze, biggest reasons there. As a matchup, not sure how good those teams will be, but Caleb Williams on your team and some of the glimpses he showed in this preseason, I think that'll be very fun, very exciting to watch. And then finally, Jets for 49ers. That's going to be a very exciting game. Jets fans obviously coming into the season super hype. They have their guy back. They have that guy back. We'll see where Aaron Rodgers is. Is he still MVP caliber player after coming off that type of injury? His age is up there, missed the whole season. I don't know that he even played the preseason. I don't watch preseason games, by the way. I think they're the dumbest things ever. Start the season. Start the season. What are we doing? But yeah, those are the games I have to circle for week 1. Super excited for NFL to be back, man. That is gonna be a blast. And we'll see where these teams land, but obviously go Falcons. Hopefully we are contenders this year. Felt like we've had the right pieces here and there, but we're missing that quarterback. And now we have not one but 2. And we'll see how we do, but very excited about the season and about the other teams and the season as a whole. So we'll see. And last but not least, switching gears to the NBA and basketball as a whole, the Dog Days were blessed by the Olympics this year. didn't have to go too long without basketball. Um, the obviously the Olympics with uh, the USA defeating France was incredible. Um, we saw the heroics from Steph, LeBron. Just again, he's single handedly and this Olympics shifted my conversation. I don't know, like I have to still marinate on it, but it's getting tougher and tougher to not give that guy GOAT status. I mean, at 39 years old, and I mean, he was the MVP of the Olympic team. Like, it wasn't like he was along for the ride or just that supportive figure out there. He was dominating. He when we needed it most, he was the spark plug for that. He was the creator for that. I mean, doing it at this age for this long, man, it's tough. It's tough not to give it to him. But obviously, great performance, great win. Steph, top 5 player. I mean, let's cut it out, guys. We who's doing what he displayed again when we needed it most. He went into his heroics bag, and just showed how unbelievable he is, man. But what I am more interested about is the next Olympics in 2028. It is being that here's what I took away from it. Obviously happy that the USA team won. And everybody's kind of been talking about how the gap is closing between the world and the USA. And we could see it. Like, most of these teams have NBA players, multiple of them on their roster. And then I think it's also a credit to the NBA of their expansion of the game. Something I mentioned earlier with the NFL being slow to that, but they've done it for a long time. And it's showing. So I think it's beautiful overall. But as a fellow American, we obviously want to be at the top all the time. And especially when you have guys like Wemby and these teams who just have this sort of chemistry with each other. They love playing together. It took the old guys, air quotes, KD, Steph, and LeBron to win that. Same way I said earlier, it would have taken, or Georgia would have lost to Auburn last year had it not been for Brock Bowers. The Team USA doesn't win this without Steph, KD, and LeBron. Like, it's that simple. I don't know if we're even playing for a gold medal game without them. We almost lost the game before that. Like, so the fact that it took that much and the world is clearly that much closer to the USA basketball team, it made me look ahead to, okay, what does 2028 look like? And so I have here the prediction of the roster for what that team could look like. Remains to be seen. It's 4 years away. But we have Ja Morant, Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Cade Cunningham for the guards. And then Jason Tatum, Zion, Banchero, Jalen Williams from OKC, Cooper Flag for the forwards, and then our two bigs would be Bam and Chet. I don't know why. Maybe they think mileage, maybe. I would probably put 80 there as well. I think he could still be there, maybe more so in the role that LeBron and those guys were in this go around. But looking at that roster, I think it is a good team. We'll see if Cooper Flag how he pans out. But heck of a player. I don't see why not, especially how he performed in the practices against the Team USA. But looking at that roster and then looking at the world, I don't know. I don't know if and again, obviously these guys could elevate their games, and they could elevate into what just this sort of superstardom where um they demand the same attention and the same respect, or looked at in the same light as your KDs and LeBrons and Stephs. But I just think there are a lot of good countries out there. They're getting better and better. And I saw that it took everything that we had against the best of the best, the Hall of Famers of the Hall of Famers, to win gold this year. So that will be very, very interesting. That is I hear murmurs about it, but I wanted to address that head on. Like, that is going to be very interesting to see, how that pans out. And then I'll just touch on the biggest offseason moves um, uh, this offseason for the NBA. Obviously, the Mavericks adding Clay there. I think they're a serious threat. Obviously, made it to the finals this year. Fell short against the Celtics. But that move, adding Clay, obviously with how uh, um, the Mavericks play, having a knockdown, and we know Clay can have his moments, but having somebody like Clay out there to just help spread the floor even more for Kyrie and Luka, and just being a reliable shooter for them. Oh, that's gonna be big, and I think they're gonna be a threat again. And I had my doubts against the Mavericks. I don't I didn't think that style that they played with just basically, let's just hope our two best players score a bunch of points. Like, I didn't think that was going to take them as far as it did. But they were playing so elite. Like, it was, I mean, it's like, all right, well, if y'all are gonna do that every night, and then it was kind of Luca would start and then Kyrie would close. Like, they had a nice balance to it. Um, but I think ultimately it ran its course in the finals, and the better team won. But adding Clay, huge for them. And then 76ers with PG, I think that's going to be very, very scary. Um, Joel, if he can stay healthy, that's always going to be, I think, the topic around him. He is such a force, man. He is such a force, and such a dominant force. He was leading the MVP discussion last year before his injury. So um, them adding PG to the docket will be very exciting, and I think they can very much threaten the Celtics next year. And I think the Celtics are just such a well-oiled machine that it's going to take a lot to get them out of here. But I think that's one team that can go toe to toe with them. And they did lose Tobias, so we'll ultimately see where their bench is, because that obviously in the playoffs that matters a great deal. But um, that core right there is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think easily a top two team in the East. Um, and then we got OKC adding Caruso, adding Harkenstein, um, or Hartenstein, whatever, from the Knicks, 55 from the Knicks. I think they are another well-oiled machine. They run that machine through SGA. Their role players role play, and Chet. I think he's only going to get better and more dominant. Um, and they're going to be. I mean, adding Alex Caruso was just huge and really unfair. I mean, they I think they're going to be even better defensively. They already were great defensively, and adding him to that machine, I think they're going to be up there again in the West. And now they have that year of playoff experience under their belt. They'll be more mature. They'll be more prepared. And watch out, watch out. But huge offseason moves for me. And then the Knicks, of course, the Villanova Knicks did it again, adding Mikal Bridges to the roster, 3-and-D guy, and coming out of not Boston but Brooklyn as the number one option. Like, Brooklyn is rebuilding, so they weren't in a position to, like, he wasn't going to make them competitive, but just that experience, I feel like will help him and be able to take some pressure off of Jalen Brunson a lot. And as we saw in last year's playoffs, Jalen Brunson can carry a great deal. But I think they're going to be dangerous and another one of those teams that you just don't want to see when it matters. Playing in Madison Square Garden makes my head hurt. So I can't imagine playing against them, especially in the playoffs. It's just they're going to be a tough out, very tough nosed team, and well coached. So very excited about that, and we'll see. And obviously, like I said, ATL, everything. My Hawks, I don't know. I don't know, man. We got the number one pick who is seemingly going to be a role player. We, had to get rid of Murray. And so back to Trey running the show, which I think is best for him in his game. But I think it's just another year of probably being a mid-tier team and just hoping for the best. Hoping we can get hot, right time, maybe make a playoff run, get out of that doggone play-in team and game. Like, that's getting old. So we'll see where the Hawks land. It's very low expectations for them, though. I think we're missing a piece in a big piece, really. Someone who can be more complimentary to Trey. But and I'll throw in the Pelicans there as well. This just made me think of it. Them adding DeJounte Murray is very good. I think they will be even more competitive this year, and they haven't moved Brandon Ingram. And so that core there, and a healthy Zion, who we saw shedded a bunch of weight, dangerous team, very dangerous team. And so that'll be exciting to see. But go Hawks, no matter what. Go Hawks. So we'll see how that lands. And we'll end this episode, the very first episode. I'm super excited about this again, man. We'll end it with a little fun question. This one is and I'll try to put the graphic up here so we can see, but which would you choose? It's an NBA question, and they have 9 different options, and it is, which would you choose? The first one is D Rose never got injured. Second one is Chris Paul joined the Lakers, where David Stern stepped in and vetoed the trade. KD stays in OKC. And number 4, we have Greg Oden stays healthy. 5 is AI wins a ring. 6 is D Wade wins an MVP, which I didn't realize when I first saw that he didn't have an MVP, but played in a very tough era to win one. 7 is Melo, drafted by Detroit, which was an interesting one. And then they have MJ played in 2021, and or I guess probably just this era, and then LeBron played in 80s or 90s. Well, the era thing is like it's so many just different scenarios with that. It's like, does MJ play in this era with his same game, or how players play today? Like it's so I would throw both of those out, and the same with Bron playing in the 80s or 90s. Melo drafted by Detroit would have been interesting, but it's again, you never really know. Like, would they have then been the same Detroit that wins the championship? I think they put that there because he just would have been um, in the East and on a better team, and probably would have gotten him a ring. But big assumption, I think probable or possible, but just don't know. So my vote has to go to D Rose. Never got injured, man. That was, and again, I was watching that playoff game where he got injured, and it was sad to see then. But had we known that it would never be the same from there, um, it probably would have brought us to tears, as in us as fans, like not being able to see him fully reach his potential and um just have that longevity run of a great dominant player, man. um that it's so sad because boy, oh boy, was he dominant and just a force to be reckoned with, man. Like, he was single-handedly by himself going toe to toe with that big three in Miami. Had it not been for that big three, he probably would have won a championship or two. Like, he was just, I mean, he was just tough, man. Um, I think youngest MVP ever. And it's just a shame that we couldn't see that for longer. Um, one of the best. He shoot. I think I saw him on a list of if he's a Hall of Fame player. Like, he's in that conversation now. Like, because the run wasn't as long, but that would have there was a time where you that was an afterthought. Oh yeah, after D Rose retired, you're gonna be in Hall of Fame. Like, he was that dominant, man. Um, and would have gone down. I think still will, but to an extent, would have gone down as one of the best ever. Like, he would have been in those conversations. Um, and so that one hurts me. Like, even talking about it, it's like, man, what a shame. But that's the one I would go with. And I think we'll try to end the shows with some like random fun facts or some thought provoking questions to end it. But man, this was an incredible first episode. Like I said, we will filter in some guests here and there moving forward. Um, and again, sometimes it'll be guests, sometimes it'll just be me. But we'll just be talking about the latest and greatest, man. We'll be able to have some NFL talks after this week. So that'll be super exciting. Um, we'll see. We got the NBA season in a couple months. So super excited for the seasons coming up. Super excited to be starting this podcast, man. I look forward to all the great things we have coming up, and I appreciate you all starting this journey with me. And see you on the next episode. Thanks.